Perfect. Thank you very much, Sonia. So good morning, everybody. Thank you all for attending our webinar today. So this morning, we're looking at employee theft. It may be probably not the most attractive or enchanting topic, I suppose, but unfortunately, it is an issue for employers, and when it is an issue, it does have a significant impact for businesses. So it is a kind of a necessary evil, I suppose, to look at it. So we look at the types of theft that can happen in an organisation. We look at some preventative measures that employers can take, and then we look at how, well, if you do suspect theft in your organisation, what do you do, or what can you do, and what should you do? So my colleague Michelle Arkins is here with me today, and Michelle will be dropping in and out of conversation with some useful tidbits of information and cases and whatnot throughout the seminar. So I hope you find it useful, and as always, we'll take your questions at the end. And again, this is usually a really interesting point in the webinar, and we kind of have a lot of good discussion at the Q&A. So we welcome your questions as always. So to start off, I suppose, give you a little statistic. When I was doing some research for this, it found that there's research out there that reveals that 68% of employees have admitted to theft in their workplace, whether it's small theft such as supplies, petty cash, and even right down to their colleagues' lunches. I know in our own workforce you wouldn't last long if you were caught taking somebody's lunch. But you know, I make light of this, but it is a significant figure, and I think it does illustrate just how much of an issue theft can be in our workplaces. Whether we might think it's not, we might think, oh, that doesn't happen in my workplace. But I think this figure suggests, and it's an Irish research as well, that actually it does, and it can, even down to kind of, you know, these small things. You know, and although we say these are small pieces, the pens, the post-it notes, the pre-stamped envelopes, but that they're just kind of inklings of what else can happen. But if we look at the real challenges that theft can pose, I suppose, there's research again from Retail Ireland, and they say that over €500 million in retail stock is stolen every year. In the UK, employee theft and fraud costs British businesses £1.68 million per year. And then going across the pond to the US, the FBI say that employee theft is the fastest growing crime in America. So I think these are just facts that illustrate to us that employee theft is a real concern and a real issue for employers right across the board. So I want to turn now to look at the types of employee theft. So the first one, and probably the most obvious one, absolutely, is the theft of cash or goods. And as all, you know, we're all familiar with the stories of people maybe putting their hands in the till. But this can also be stealing inventory, as we've already just seen. So whether that is the stationery, or it could be products from your warehouse. You know, shrinkage is the term that we're familiar with when we're here of retail, I suppose, in terms of their stock, whether it's taking it from the warehouse or the loading dock before it's even registered. And again, the supplies of the stationery supplies or kitchen supplies. So that's the first one. The next one that I wanted to kind of touch on was payroll theft. So this is the kind of falsification of records. For example, when employees are putting in their expense sheets. So they may be putting in extra time that they were on the road, or extra mileage, so they can claim an extra few pound in their mileage. You know, it is an issue, and it is there, so it's just something to be aware of. So the manipulation of company records to embezzle or hide hide theft. This is the next one, and I suppose who we're looking at here would, I suppose, be your bookkeepers, or maybe a senior executive. It's generally accountancy fraud that I'd be talking about here. And again, it is an issue. It's probably one of the behind retail theft and the theft of goods, probably the next kind of highest theft we're talking about in Ireland. And then the final one is information theft, which some of us probably wouldn't spring to mind automatically, but many employees do intentionally steal information from their employers to benefit themselves or competitors. And the types of information will include, or could include, your customer lists, your sales figures, your marketing plans, product development data, intellectual property, so on and so forth. There's just a massive amount of information that can be stolen and is stolen by employees. And it can occur through a number of ways, whether it's by email, whether they're printing out copies of employee data, whether they're putting onto a USB key. Really, in today's world, there's so many kind of I dare say, options available or avenues that they can be using. So, and this type of theft can be really damaging. We're not just talking about the cost of it, but also there's reputational cost as well. So there's a whole range of areas where theft can occur, I suppose, just to kind of illustrate that to you. I wanted to look then as well as to why an employee steals. And in terms of looking at who commits theft, there really is no one profile that is much more likely to be found guilty of theft than another person. It's very difficult to say, well, that person is in such an age, you know, they're male, they're female, whatever it is, or they're prime candidate to commit theft. And researchers and kind of cases have shown that that's not the case. There is no one profile. So what I suppose contributes to an employee going to commit theft? So there's kind of three, and research shows us that there's this theft triangle, and three factors that can contribute. And the first one is need or greed. So really human greed is a huge factor, and an employee's desire to fund a lifestyle that they can't afford, I suppose, is what we're talking about here. And there are cases that where staff have committed fraud in order to, let's say, pay off debts that they had. They then continue to undertake and commit the fraud or commit the theft. They continue to do that after the arrears have been paid because they're now funding a lifestyle that they wouldn't usually be able to afford. The next one is rationalization. So this is when an employee feels that they deserve to take this. They have a right to take this, and whatever way they rationalise that in their head, it's almost like, well, after all I do for them, they feel that they work hard enough and that they deserve this. Maybe they feel that they didn't get the pay rise they were entitled to, so I'll just take this in return, or the company can well afford it. So it's that kind of rationalisation in their head. And then finally, it's opportunity. They think they can get away with it. And again, research shows that those who stole from the workplace, 74% admitted that they did it because they felt that they would get away from it. So when you have these three steps in existence, I suppose, or these three factors, it really is, I don't want to say a hotbed for theft, but they can contribute to theft. And they can certainly kind of, if these three factors are in existence, it's something to be just kind of concerned about, I suppose. So I want to get into it now as to, right, well, how do you prevent theft, and what are the steps that you can take to prevent it in your workplace? And some people say, well, where there's a will, there's a way. But I think by taking certain steps, you can definitely send a clear message out to your employees that you are a vigilant employer and that inappropriate behaviour is not acceptable or tolerated in your workplace. And we've come up with 7 key steps that we think will really be key in helping you prevent workplace theft. Before I want to go into these, I just want to say that these really are best practice management approaches as well as helping you prevent theft. So even if you think theft is not an issue in your organisation, or it never has been, you may want to take some points from the next 7 steps that are just really good management points of views or management practices that might actually work, or you could implement some or if not all of them in your organisation. So the first one that I want to look at is pre-employment screening. So it is really vital to hire carefully. And I can't reiterate that enough. So when you're hiring somebody, always carry out reference checks on a new employee. Reference checks should be carried out before they start work, but where it's not possible, they should be carried out really as soon as possible. Maybe they didn't want to have, they don't want you to contact an existing employer before they hand in their notice. But certainly where that's the situation, I would always recommend that you're making a job offer subject to receipt of suitable references. So the job can always be subject to the receipt of suitable references. And I really would recommend that you take the time out to do this yourself, and take the time out to put the effort into this. And there's different formats that people will use in terms of getting references, whether it's sending out a sheet, a questionnaire that they ask somebody to sign. I generally recommend try and pick up the phone and talk to the employer, because you get a much better feel, and people will tend to be maybe a little bit more forthcoming with you over the phone as opposed to just on a letter or on a questionnaire. And so I've given a sample there of the types of questions that you might ask. You're not asking, and you cannot ask, did somebody was there anybody ever caught stealing in the workplace? That would be an inappropriate question to ask, but you can definitely ask questions around their past behaviour. What were they like as an employee? And really, past behaviour is an excellent, I suppose, it's an excellent indicator for future behaviour. And you can also ask, why did the individual leave employment? And that kind of leaves an open-ended question where it's putting the onus then back on the ex-employer to give you the information. And always a good question, I suppose, to ask is, would the previous employer rehire them? And then, that's where you get a good feel for what they were like and what they were like in the team as well. But again, this is a real general practice, good management practice for all hires, whether it's, to help prevent theft or not. I would really recommend that when you're hiring, do references and get references, and in your contracts, if you're issuing them, you can always include a clause that the job offer is subject to receipt of suitable references. The internal controls that I want to touch on is really about you as a manager, or a business owner, as an employer, just being on top of certain aspects in your workplace, with the aim really here to minimise the opportunity insofar as possible for any theft or wrongdoing to occur. So given an example here, they might sound obvious, but really, in my experience, some of them do happen. But I suppose don't give sole control of your accountancy books to any one employee. I appreciate that this can be difficult in a small companies, but if it's not possible to have more than one person looking at your accounts, make sure you carry out regular audits, or make sure that they're saved and stored somewhere that you can locate them. Not just one person knows where they are. That if you could pop in the morning into the office, you'd know exactly where to find your accounts folder and your accounts documents. Drop in, if you have stores or premises or warehouses, drop in intermittently to those locations. So perhaps, when I say drop in intermittently, occasionally unplanned, so it's just a kind of an ad hoc drop in. And so if somebody is always locking up on a Thursday evening, you might drop in the odd Thursday just to say hello and just to see for yourself. Alternate your roster. Don't always have somebody working on their own at the same time. Every week, they know they're on their own all the time. It might just give them that kind of opportunity that we spoke about earlier. And I actually have my own personal experience of this many years ago in my first job, actually, when I was working in the local news agents. What we had at the time, there was a girl who she opened up the store every Sunday quite early in the morning, kind of before mass times, and people would be coming in to get their papers and whatnot. But she was the only person in every Sunday for about 3 hours, and it must have been about a year later, however way it was discovered that she had been taking cash over that time as well. And that just goes to show that she was there every morning on a Sunday on her own, and she had that opportunity. So again, alternate your roster so somebody is not always coming in the same times, the same week on their own. Have a refunds and have a voids approved or witnessed or signed. So I suppose if you think about it, when you go to bigger stores, if you're trying to exchange something, you always have to go to desk A. You can't just go to any of the tills. There's always a certain desk where you get your refunds signed. Or always make sure that a manager checks it or signs the receipt, sign and exchange. And keep track of keys or alarm codes as well. And again, in a company that I worked for in the past, we would never give keys or alarm codes to somebody on probation. So we'd make sure they were fully past their probation before we were giving them their keys. Michelle, did you have any other points that you wanted to come in on kind of the internal controls in the stores?
Well, absolutely. There was a recent case, I think just last year, concerning an employee that worked for a large company, Woody's, actually, DIY store. And again, it was the same thing. She was employed as a cashier, promoted then to a manager, like a supervisor. And her primary role would have been to look after and take care of the cash at the end of the shifts. And when she was taken on, I think she came from a couple of different stores over the years when she worked with them. And the kind of customer practice that was in place at that time, even before she took on the main supervisory role, was that literally the cash was sort of a little bit all over the place, and there wasn't really adequate procedures or policies kind of correcting this on a day-to-day basis. So when she came on board and she was assigned to that particular duty, she took it upon herself, and fair play to her, to to get the books as right as possible and to document everything properly. But what happened during this instance was, it was found that there was a couple of, that you just mentioned there earlier, it wasn't necessarily voids, but refunds, that would have been given out on the footage when they investigated with the CCTV, the CCTV individual who would have been, I presume, the security man, would have seen when the refunds were given, there was nobody present, and the names that were being recorded on the slip were indeed fictitious. These people didn't exist, the addresses, so on and so forth. And this was done seemingly through balancing the tills at the end of the shift, or if the employee was kind of going away, let's say, or she's going to be on annual leave, she was sort of balancing them up herself. But long story short, I suppose, it was investigated, and then she was disciplined for this type of conduct. And I suppose the defence that she used at the time was, this was something that was always done, that there wasn't correct parameters put in place by the employers. And what they had chosen to do at that stage, the company, was they were going to reinstate her, but reinstate her as a cashier. And she said that indeed that wasn't the role that she was playing in the company, that she wanted to come back as obviously a manager, that was her direct role. And they ended out giving compensation to her, quite a significant award as well. So again, I suppose it just kind of states what you say there. There's one thing to be able to try and manage voids and anything that goes on with the till when you give responsibility to individuals that are looking after it, but you have to make sure there's some sort of policy in place in the company. Otherwise, you're really literally leaving it up to the employee to kind of invent their own,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it kind of says as well, you really should know what's going on in your company and be on top of it. And obviously these practices that Michelle was talking about in this case have been going on for quite a time.
Absolutely,
and that's an issue in itself as well. So it's very much kind of keeping up on top of it as well. And to help to create, and all that will help create a culture of really no tolerance, which is really what you want. So I want to move on then and to whistleblowing, which is an interesting one. And most instances of theft in the workplace are revealed or are uncovered by co-workers who suspect wrongdoing, I suppose. And a UK study revealed that this could be as high as 40%. So with this in mind, I really suggest that you put in a whistleblowing policy in place. So what a whistleblowing policy will do, it will clearly set out a forum for which employees can raise their suspicions that they might have. So where do they go, who do they go to, and how do they raise that? So there are a number of benefits really that I would point out. Firstly, employees will know who they should go to if they have a suspicion that somebody is committing wrongdoing, and they'll know that the company would take it seriously, and that all concerns will be dealt with seriously, that the company takes suspicion seriously, and that they investigate the suspicions, and they do so confidentially insofar as possible. And I say insofar as possible because sometimes you may get kind of much more larger cases or more serious cases where larger investigations come at the higher end of theft and fraud, I suppose. In those cases, it may be necessary it may not be possible to keep the individual's identity confidential, but for the most part, and in most cases, the aim should be to keep that person keep their name confidential. In terms for the employee as well, it also gives the employee who's raising the issue or who's blowing the whistle, it gives them reassurance that by raising the concern, they will be in no way putting themselves or their own position at any sort of disadvantage. So that's the kind of, you'll refer to that, and any whistleblowing policy should make reference to that. And again, when we're looking at the higher end cases that may have major significance in terms of committing an actual crime or against health and safety, we have actually legislation in place with the Protected Disclosure Act that states that employees can't be treated in any way less favourably because they blew the whistle. So, it would be wrong if you felt that somebody raised an issue, and the best thing really to do, because if it's such a big issue, it would just get rid of that person and dismiss them. That would be totally wrong. Now, in saying that, when we were talking about this whistleblowing, actually, before we were putting the presentation together today, a whistleblowing policy is not just it doesn't give employees carte blanche to complain about employees that they don't like or that they just don't like working with. It's not a carte blanche to do that, and certainly any good whistleblowing policy will state that and will make reference to that, so that if you are found to be blowing the whistle or making allegations against somebody and they're found to be untrue, or you've done it inappropriately, then that in turn could result in disciplinary proceedings. So that's just another aspect to be aware of it. But also from an employer's perspective, it's really good to have a whistleblowing policy in place, because it allows you to set out the forum for how people should raise an issue. So particularly if you want people to bring their issues or bring their suspicions and suspicions that they have to be raised internally first. So that can prevent them from going externally out to the media, for example. Firstly, you don't want cases to be going out externally into the media, into the public domain, when you might actually, that could be really damaging on your company. So you want them to be dealt with first internally. So that's obviously positive for a company side. And then obviously from a potential perpetrators' point of view, if they know that their fellow co-workers are watching for theft, or that they could be watching for theft, they too probably will think twice before stealing. And definitely Bright Contracts would have a whistleblowing policy in place, and I think Michelle was just going to kind of show that to you now.
Yeah, I'll be just looking here in our software. I'll just read where we're here and go down. There we are. A whistleblowing policy, and a very interesting just comment you made there earlier on, Laura, was to be very careful with employees that are not trying to use the Protected Disclosure Act throughout the whistleblowing policy kind of in the wrong way. Like there was a case of Bolton School versus Evans, where there was a particular teacher that deliberately hacked into the school's security system, into their computer system, to test and demonstrate his belief that the school's security protocols were inadequate. So obviously the school disciplined them, quite rightly, for the unlawful interference. But then he took a case to the employment tribunal to state that obviously the information that he was using at the time, he would have been protected under the Protected Disclosures Act, and he shouldn't therefore have been disciplined or been touched for it. But again, quite rightly, the Employment Appeals Tribunal found that you can't be protected by, the wrong, even though you're trying to demonstrate some relevant wrongdoing in the company and you're trying to disclose it, that you're still going to be liable to be disciplined for misconduct in the workplace, because you've no right to do it in that sort of a fashion, I suppose. So that's just something to be wary of. And you'll see inside in the software, we give you a full comprehensive policy that outlined a lot of what Laura had spoken about. So it just gives employees in the company a good understanding of how they can raise a complaint, what type of complaint, and the kind of process and formula that they'll follow, and to ensure, to make sure that they are happy enough that when they raise these sort of concerns, that they're not going to be treated less favourably in the workplace, and that there's some element of protection there, not only if they're correct, but if they're incorrect in their findings also. But as I say, the employee isn't meant to turn into like an investigator, and employees need to be careful of that. If they do suspect wrongdoing, you're not meant to go out of your way to try and break into your manager's office trying to find these files, or or try and record telephones or meetings belonging to people. So you just need to be very, very careful, because you will be breaking the law even under the Data Protection Act as well. So to be mindful of that. But as I say, it's inside our company handbook here, so the full policy that's there for it.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's there, and it's a standard. And again, I think the benefits are clear in terms of you want to promote that people, if they suspect wrongdoing, they should blow the whistle, and the responsibility would be on them to blow the whistle, but not, as Michelle said, to go insofar as to try and prove it themselves. Then that's the role and the responsibility of the employer or the manager. And a good policy will set all that out very clearly. So talking about policies and procedures, I do want to move on to policies and procedures, because this is really key, and it's a key part again in how you manage theft, and all types of theft really. And when we kind of go back to our 4 types of theft at the start. So you can get some really good policies in place that will protect you and they protect the company. They'll illustrate that you take theft seriously and that you are trying to promote a no-tolerant workplace, and they'll also help you then managing theft if it does occur, or if you suspect that it's occurring in your workplace. So the first one is the right to search, and this really is a key policy, not only in the retail environment, but really in any work environment, particularly when we've kind of looked at the type of theft that can occur. And so having a search policy gives you the right to request that an employee will agree to be searched. And from decisions that we've seen coming down from the EAT, the Employment Appeals Tribunal in the past, it really is clear that where there is to be a search policy, and those search provisions must be clearly set out in the contract of employment or the staff handbook. So if you have suspicions that somebody might be stealing from you, and you want to search them to help prove your allegations or prove your suspicions, you need to have a search policy in place that will allow you to do so. So did you want to come in with a case?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, again, we have a right to search policy in the Bright Contracts handbook. And now, as you said earlier on, you need to be very careful with this policy. It doesn't give you an automatic right just to, I suppose, ad hoc on any day start looking into employees' bags or lockers, and you need to be very careful also that if an employee refuses the search, kind of how you deal with that as well, that you're not going to go straight down the disciplinary route with it. So it's important, again, if it's in the workplace, that's fine and you can have it, but be very, very careful when it comes to using it, that the provision allowing for search not be considered by an employer as a reason or right to enforce employees to open up their bags or their wares or whatever. Even regards to the contract. So my advice to everyone would be, have it there if you want to use it, but seek advice before you carry it out. And again, if there's suspicions in the workplace when it does come to theft and you think it's necessary, it's extremely important how you actually work with that process. So i.e., is it across the board that obviously if it's a male or a female that's been searched, that it's a female that's searching a female? If it's a case, if it was something very serious, if you did want to get the guards involved, that again the same thing applies to them, that you have to be very, very careful how you handle it. Yeah,
and then it's kind of come up in conversation or in cases that you've dealt with before as well, that you might not want to do it, and it wouldn't be best advisable to do it in one-on-one. It's always best to have somebody else present as well, and that's the type of thing that you'll be making reference to in your policy, and it shows then that you're kind of you're showing consideration for that, and whether it is that the employee can nominate somebody to come in with them. And also on that note as well, it's where do you conduct it? Is it, you don't want to, and you shouldn't really be conducting a search out in the middle of the floor, in the middle of your shop, or in the middle of the office. Ideally you want to do it kind of a little bit more subtly, but that's the kind of things that your policy should contain and it will contain. But we'll move on, I suppose, and we spoke earlier about employees stealing data and information, and there are certain policies that employers can put in place to help protect them against this type of theft. So the first one that I would want to look at is confidentiality, and this would be a clause that a lot of our customers would use quite regularly. So it's a clause and it's an agreement, it can also be known as a non-disclosure clause, just in case you've kind of come across that term. But it's an agreement usually included as part of the contract of employment that prevents an employee from disclosing confidential information, trade secrets, marketing initiatives, company financials, or other customer information. So if you have information that gives your business a competitive edge, this clause will provide some assurance really that your employee will not divulge it to competitors or to use it for themselves. Is there anything on that?
Yeah, there was a very interesting case there was two car garages, showrooms, again both located in the same town, and let's say if you want to call kind of garage A, the employee had left, gone working for garage B, and subsequently took information relating to, as you call, trade secrets, that confidential information relating to customers of company A. So this, again, the complaint was made through the data commissioner's office, and they kind of came back and they made sure that anything that was obviously taken by the employee could not be used because you've no right to use it. I mean, you didn't retrieve that data yourself, and that the actual customer didn't allow Garage B to use it. So this is just something, again, where it's the side where if an employee leaves that you need to be very wary of what can go with them. As I think you mentioned this earlier, where it can be taken on external hard drives, USBs, even in hard copies, like sheets that's been removed out of the company. But also when it does go into the hands of, let's say, company B, how that's handled. And it's handled again through the likes of the data committer's office, where the complaint can be made from company A that you're aware that this employee has taken that data, that they are using it in another company. And even if it's a case if you get, I think company A received actually, a couple of, I wouldn't say tip-offs, it was actually complaints by their existing customers to say that, you know, John, who left you a couple of months ago, he's actually trying to contact us. He's informed us he's gone over to such and such garage and he's looking to see will we take the business. So again, that's where you're looking in with the confidentiality side of it and the data protection as well.
Yeah, and post-termination, that kind of, that links on that as well. So post-termination restriction clause is a clause really that restricts what an employee can do once they leave an employment. And I suppose the nature of it will vary depending on the organisation and the role, but generally what employers will be concerned about is a non-solicitation of employees and customer data, just as in that case Michelle talked about. So employers may also seek to, prevent an employee who has left employment from working with a competitor as well. Similar to, again, the exact case. You can put a clause in your contract that says, you know, you're not allowed to work for a competitor for a particular period of time after leaving employment. And again, that helps to again, protect your data, protect what you're doing. I worked with somebody before who was working in they were doing a lot of research and development, so they wouldn't let somebody work for a competitor for a period of 3 months after, because they felt that any kind of marketing developments or product initiatives would have sufficiently kind of developed in that time. They didn't want that employee leaving a different company and leaving their company and going to another company and then kind of just using all those trade secrets and all the marketing initiatives that they were doing and developing and putting out a new product to the market. So that's what your post-termination restriction will do. It will restrict the employee after they leave employment. The only thing to say on these type of clauses is that they really have to be written on a case-by-case basis, and even if you have a clause like this in your contract of employment, that doesn't necessarily say that the courts will allow it or that they view it to be reasonable and enforceable. So it does need to be reasonable. It would be unreasonable to say in your contract, you know, generally would be unreasonable to say you're not allowed to work for a competitor in Ireland for 5 years, because really how is somebody meant to make a living or make a wage with that kind of restriction? But it has to be like a 3-month period would be reasonable. But again, that's the type of clause, particularly if you have somebody who's working in development or marketing or customer and somebody at a senior level, again, that could be a very useful clause to have. Similar to that, again, is an intellectual property clause, and this clause will make it clear that all intellectual property created by an employee in the course of their employment is the property of the company, is your property, and it shouldn't be taken or used elsewhere. So again, your examples would be maybe an IT coder who's developing code and software. It could be your customer support sheets or some sort of a help guideline. So there could be any kind of any number of things that would fall into intellectual property.
I just actually on that, Laura, I'll just show you quickly, again, even from the bright contract side of it, what you've just spoken about, we have a full restrictive covenant that's included in the software. So just give you an outline of where, again, you can build in those type of restrictions when an employee leaves, such as non-competition, non-solicitation, non-dealing, non-poaching, and in the general terms. And exactly as you said there, what you're always looking to show, and especially in a court of law, that there is some sort of you're trying to persuade them that there's an existence of legitimate business reason as to why it needs to be protected, and then it's the parameters, again, as you said, that needs to be set. So if it's, you know, a reasonable time frame, or that you're not saying, I know one lady that actually I spoke with last week, she was a professional baker, and there was restrictive a post-determination clause with her previous employer stating that she couldn't bake for 3 years. Now, again, I wasn't speaking directly, she was just with another customer of ours, and I kind of said, look, you might perhaps look into that yourself. That seems very excessive.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can see how some of them are very unreasonable and how the courts can get a little bit annoyed. But, you know, it does depend on the case itself. But just so you know that actually we have something that's drawn up, and then again, you can edit yourself to whatever suits the business. And we also have, again, I know, sorry, you touched on, just reminding me of it, the confidentiality agreement. Again, this is something that, aside of the contract where we'll enter in the confidential information, which will be obviously applicable to everyone in the company, there probably will be certain positions in the companies, as you said, maybe more senior, or somebody that was involved, with coding for the business or something, that you will have a more extensive confidentiality agreement with them because of the type of information that they have access to. So that'll be a separate agreement that you'll give out to them when they join. Yeah,
and it's perfectly acceptable to have that if you have different people, in different roles and different levels of seniority in your company. Their contracts will all be different, and that's perfectly fine. You won't have the one contract for everybody. You can put in different clauses as appropriate to suit each role and each person, and then generally your handbook will be the kind of standard one-size-fits-all general approach, I suppose.
Yeah, and then obviously you get them signed and dated. They're no good to you if there's a signature on them, especially if you do come to, using it in court. If you did want to take a case and sue an ex-employee or something for wrongdoing, you need to ensure that you have that policy and that it was signed.
And we could lose a run of ourselves here talking about another point. And that you're regularly reviewing it, because there was a case recently as well where they had a post-termination restriction that was put in place when an employee started. And to really cut a long story short, he had been promoted several times within the company, and it was a few years later, and whatever way the relationship ended, but the courts found that the post-termination restriction that was put in place when he started was null and void, or wasn't applicable because his role had changed. So with all of these policies, and I think again, when we talk about general management best practice, is to continuously review them and ensure that they apply to the role that the individual is doing at the time. And I'm going to move on because I'm conscious we're going to lose the run of ourselves with time. Email and social media policy is the last policy that I want to touch on. And I suppose given that the vast majority of employees today working, and so much of their work revolves around IT systems, it really is vital for employers to have IT policies in place. And such policies will prohibit employees from sending confidential data over email inappropriately, or it'll set out boundaries of what is acceptable and unacceptable behaviour on social media. So the employee, and you should also, and it's fully acceptable to reserve the right to monitor an employee's work emails and their work computer usage, and that would be included in it as well. Do you want to touch on social media or email policies?
No, just to say, again, it's a huge area, but only recently there was, I think, 3 or 4 blogs that were completed on Bright Contracts. Yeah. So, like, if anybody even had an interest in that, if you go onto Bright Contracts and look at the blogs, it goes through the different stages, because there's quite a bit when you're looking at protecting the company's LinkedIn accounts, the company's Facebook accounts. I mean, there was cases, again, from companies that we've dealt with, where an individual would have been looking after basically marketing and advertising the company and pulling as many people in, let's say for specific nights that they were running in nightclubs, and or just even wine tasting nights for off licenses, retail trade, throughout seasonal kind of periods throughout the year. And when the individual left, they took all the contacts. There was no way of even, being able for the company to get back in with passwords and codes or anything like that. So to be very careful. And these were individuals, again, set up on their own, and had all of, and you're talking thousands, it's not hundreds, it's thousands of contacts that they had belonging to the business. So just be very careful. And then, as you said there, with the social media side of it, that employees are equally aware when they are out and about and posting things on their own accounts, that it can't, have any sort of reaction with employers, or how employers may perceive them.
Yeah, it's social media is a lot of the cases, and there's only been a few because it's such a relatively up-and-coming area of employment law, I suppose. But what courts seem to be looking at is the reputational damage that might have been put on the company because of comments that were put on social media. So kind of the higher the reputational damage, obviously that's kind of more of a concern. But it's a huge area.
And it's another area in itself, isn't it? But we're just worried about anyone taking your contacts, because it still is, it's theft,
It is. So we move on anyway. Just to kind of summarise on the policies and procedures, these policies, as I said earlier, will help protect you, and it'll give you a format of how to deal with situations as they arise. If you don't have policies in place, it's never too late to put them in place. So it might be time just to review your documentation. So I'll move on. slightly maybe softer but equally really important point in terms of preventing workplace theft is to get to know your employees. So from an employee's perspective, it's really much easier to steal from someone that you don't know very well and you don't particularly like or have any kind of fondness towards them, and than it is to steal from somebody who you actually have a relationship with and you kind of consider a friend. So I would recommend, try and build a relationship with your employees so you have some idea as well as to what's going on in their life, for example, whether they're going through a difficult time, whether that be financially or whatnot, that anything that could be a strain in their life that might lead to kind of a new need to commit theft, I suppose. So you may just want to keep an eye out for changes as well in their behaviour or their attitude, and any factors that really could increase an impulse to steal. And you may be able to step in and assist, earlier on before anything escalates into the unwanted behaviour, I suppose. And kind of following on from that, kind of getting to know your employee, building relationships with your employee, is create a positive work environment. So a positive, engaged workforce will be enthusiastic about their work. They'll take a positive action for the organisation, and they really want to go above and beyond for the organisation because they feel very kind of maybe loyal to the company and they feel strongly about what the company is doing. And we spoke earlier about individuals who rationalise or justify stealing from their employer, almost in a kind of getting the employer back. But promoting a positive work environment really helps build an ethical workforce. And again, we could do a whole other webinar on how you create a positive work environment, but I've just very briefly, I suppose, a few different things or a few suggestions would be to have fair pay and benefits package, offer perks where possible, and realistic perks, I suppose, for yourself. Or if you're in a retail environment, offer discounts that that have a value to the employee, so they'll feel that they're getting it at a discounted rate rather than taking it for nothing, I suppose. And have clear communication. Take that, so it's two-way communication with you and your employees is always really key. Be seen to be open to their ideas, open to their suggestions. Take their ideas on board and get them involved. Get your employees involved in any company projects or different things that are going on in the organisation. And again, that all helps to build their emotional attachment to the company, that they feel part of the company and that they want to do the best for the company. And finally, encourage and praise your employees as well. And I think I kind of found a phrase that a happy employee is a more honest employee, and it really does help to reduce theft when an employee feels that they're cared about, or that you care for their general well-being as well. So then there's just 2 quick points on that. The last one that I want to talk about in this kind of preventive one is CCTV. It's a big area, and some employers do consider using CCTV to prevent and record theft. I will say that the use of CCTV is really highly regulated, and it's regulated by the Data Protection Commissioner, and only it's really a topical issue actually, so much so that only last December the Data Protection Commissioner issued an update and expanded guidance notes in relation to the use of CCTV, and that was as a result of increased queries and maybe increased inappropriate use of CCTV, not just in the workplace, I suppose, in general. But the guidance notes that were provided and that were issued in December, they set out kind of much more stricter guidelines around the use of CCTV. And they include that if you want to use CCTV on your premises, that first and foremost you must conduct a risk assessment and a privacy impact assessment. So what I'm talking about here, what you'll be looking at, I suppose, is you just need to show consideration and maybe have it documented or noted somewhere that you've done a risk assessment as to why you need CCTV and what the impact of that is. So you'll be looking at the purposes of the monitoring, why are you monitoring, the benefits of having it, what benefits it will bring, are there any likely adverse effects of having CCTV, and did you consider or were there any alternative measures instead of using CCTV, and why you didn't go with them. So it's just kind of a short document, but this is what the Data Commissioner will be looking for now. So if you've come to the conclusion, having done your risk assessment, yes, we've had theft in the past, it is a risk, so we need to have it here. So if you've come to that conclusion that you are using CCTV and you will be using CCTV, you need to have a policy in place. And again, there'll be specifics that you'll need to say. The purpose, you'll need to clearly state the purpose, why you are collecting data, and you'll also, the policy will also need to state that why the CCTV is being used, what the purpose of using that CCTV camera is. And if you tell your staff that the purpose of CCTV is for the purpose of preventing or detecting or investigating offences or apprehending, or if it's for monitoring health and safety issues, if that's what the reason is, you can't then use it in a disciplinary procedure if you haven't informed them that it's in place to use it and to monitor staff. If you've just said it's to monitor offenders coming in externally onto the premises and for health and safety reasons, and that's the only two reasons that you've stated, you use CCTV, you can't then turn around and use it in a disciplinary case, because again, that's just going against data protection. And
so tell them. But it's just come from, again, a retail side of it, and you're absolutely correct. You are looking from the health and safety point of view, from a public liability claim as well. If you had one of your employees, or you had somebody that came in off the street, a customer on your premises, and an incident happened, again, you're going to rely on that footage to assist you in court, especially if a claim came in by either employee or somebody from outside. But exactly as Laura said, the importance of making sure that you have the policy and making sure that you've listed in the policy where all your cameras are and the reasons for using them, that, that you're very clear with your employees as well, that if there is an incident of pilferage in the workplace, that you could, if it's investigated and you investigate it by using CCTV, that only at that stage, it's not to be used for performance management or to keep an eye on them all the time. And I have a very good case on that as well, that shows where the Data Protection Commissioner stepped in and instructed the owners of a company to stop streaming the CCTV to their mobile phones, because it was very, very excessive. They had installed CCTV everywhere. It was in a nursing home, and it was kind of in the kitchens, staff rooms, dining rooms, games rooms. Basically, they cameras everywhere, and it was the employees that made the complaint to the Data Commissioner and just said, look, this is way too excessive. We literally can't sneeze or walk around anywhere, and we also know that we're being monitored, or we have the feeling we're being monitored heavily by the company owners. Now, the directors at that stage, two brothers, had obviously said to the Data Commissioner, that this prevents us having to go on site all the time, gives us a little bit more flexibility because we can have a look, and there are certain areas that they were concerned about in the business that weren't being manned by employees, let's say for 12-hour periods, and hence the need for footage and for them to be able to check in and out. But long story short, the conclusion was, yes, there was an element and a need for so much of it, but he had to, I would say he, now could be she, the Data Commissioner's office, but had instructed that the directors cease the footage going to their mobile phones, and asked that certain cameras in the workplace be removed as well. So again, as you said, yeah, the importance is just that if you are going to, that it's there, and it's.
And if you are using it in a disciplinary case, and you've said you're using it, and it's, you've got that far, the employee has full access, or should have full access, to review any of the evidence or any of the footage that you have. They should be able to see that as well. So just be careful if you're using CCTV, that you have the correct policies in place. That's all. I really just kind of leave it at that, I suppose. So moving on then to, right, you suspect theft. It's come, you've had somebody's blown the whistle, or it's come to your attention. What do you do? So if you suspect an employee from stealing from you, whether it's whatever it is, cash, goods, information, your initial reaction, very, very understandably, as an employer, as a manager, as a business owner, will be anger, I would imagine, and you'll no doubt want to challenge them on it. And in many cases that I've come across, the employers are angry, they just want this person gone, want them off the premises, trust is gone, you want to dismiss them on the spot. We would just say, take a deep breath, keep your emotions in check, no dismissal, even if there is been action that is equated to gross misconduct, no dismissal really should be instant, and you must kind of follow a process. It doesn't have to be a long process. We'll go through that now in a moment. But if you just kind of dismiss somebody on the spot, you're going to end up at the tribunals or the WRC now. You're going to find it difficult to defend your case. So I think Michelle probably has a point on that as well. But also, just before I kind of let you in there, you don't want to promote another angle. I suppose I wouldn't recommend that you promote that employee resign, because then that also could result in a constructive dismissal case. So my advice is just to kind of take a deep breath and kind of go at a different angle, which we'll come at now. But I don't know, do you have a case on it, or will I go on?
Would you using CCTV?
No,
sorry.
With if you do suspect theft and you dismiss somebody.
Well, I've loads of different cases, but I've kind of how not to do it. Like we've two particular cases. Let's say there was a case with IKEA. Obviously, I'm sure we're all familiar with it. We've all probably a piece of IKEA's furniture in all our homes. But there was an employee that was dismissed for taking a milkshake to the value of €1.25, and he was awarded €30,000 in compensation from the Employment Appeals Tribunal. And then we have another employee who took a cup of coffee from Marks and Spencer's, and again, that was absolutely fine. That they took a case, but the case wasn't heard and it was thrown out of court. So you're kind of going, right, you're looking at two items and saying, right, a milkshake and a cup of coffee. How, did they come to that conclusion? And the simple thing is, time and time again, goes back to policies and the way that, the theft was investigated, exactly as you said earlier on, the fact that they were going to use CCTV footage throughout the disciplinary process, and they never at any stage showed that footage to the employee before bringing them into the disciplinary hearing. And that, it's funny, in two cases, there was more than the one employee in both incidents that took a milkshake, because it was three with IKEA that all at the same time took a milkshake, but yet only one is disciplined. You're kind of going, where's the fairness in that? And the same with the Marks and Spencer's case. But the huge thing, it falls right back down that, long story short again, Marks and Spencer's had a very, very good zero tolerance policy for theft. It didn't make a difference what the value, whether it was a pen down to the car outside. It didn't make a difference. They had zero tolerance. They were instructed of that. Everybody in the company knew and respected that that's how Marks and Spencer's operated, and hence it stood up in court. Perhaps a little bit unfair because the employee had a good few terms of, was with the company quite a while. But at the end of the day, that's your policy. That's your policy. Whereas with the IKEA case, they didn't, and the way that they actually carried out the disciplinary process on the back of the theft was so flawed that, €30,000 for one milkshake.
Absolutely.
Would have given them the milkshake.
Yeah. Right, so how can you be the Marks and Spencer's? How can you do it right? Sorry, I'm going backwards. So the first thing, when you get the suspicion, if you suspect that an employee is stealing from you, or if you've received an allegation that someone suspects is stealing, you must first conduct an investigation. So your disciplinary procedure will be your first point of call, because that should contain a procedure for investigations. So again, it's really important to have a disciplinary procedure in place first and foremost, I suppose. So then in cases of employee theft or suspicion of theft, the investigation really is key, and it is one of the most important steps that you will carry out. And if you can carry out a sound investigation and conclude that gross misconduct did actually occur, you're putting yourself in a much stronger position to be able to defend any dismissal or claims that you have against you. So in terms of your investigation, first and foremost, you want to assign an investigator. Ideally, somebody should be kind of slightly removed from the individual, maybe not the direct manager or a different manager in the company. I appreciate that is difficult in a smaller organisation, and courts do make allowances for that. But what I will say is that if you're dealing with something that's maybe a little bit more on the higher end, the more kind of serious cases, I suppose, in smaller organisations, it may be necessary to consider appointing an external independent investigator to come on and really take it if you think it's a tricky case. I would advise you to act fast. Once you become aware of an issue and the clock really is ticking, your investigations need to take place really in a timely fashion, because the longer it takes, the more likely critical evidence is lost and memories will fade if you're dependent on interviews. You want to decide what you're going to do with the employee, and do you suspend them. The general rule of thumb when you're dealing with a theft, which theft normally is gross misconduct, is that the employee is, and when they are suspected of gross misconduct, is that they should be suspended with pay as soon as possible. And this kind of as well is reiterated by a lot of decisions that have come down from the EAT, because they have taken the stance that if you allow an employee to continue in work while you are conducting an investigation for serious gross misconduct, it really undermines the whole decision that it was gross misconduct. And because if it's gross misconduct, you're basically saying that the whole relationship is broken down, there's no trust in existence, so then why are you letting them continue on in position? So it's generally best to suspend them, and of course you are suspending them with pay for the duration of the investigation, and because obviously guilt or innocence hasn't been proven or decided on yet. I would say that any period of suspension really should be as short as reasonably possible. You don't want to have it extended. So again, that goes back to acting fast and having a timely investigation. And it really isn't as well advisable to kind of investigate the case covertly, allowing the employee to continue what they're doing while you're investigating behind the scenes. An employee should be made aware that the investigation is taking place and what's happening. And in terms of what you're looking at when you're having the investigation, you'll be looking at, well, first and foremost, is it true that the theft take place? Was it intentional or was it unintentional? Now we go back to kind of, did the employee accidentally put a zero at the end of a mileage claim? That is possible, and it is. It might have been an unintentional theft. There's still obviously negative consequences, and you may still decide that disciplinary action is required, but maybe that the severity of it may change as well. So it's just something to kind of bear in mind. Was it intentional or was it unintentional? And again, the severity, and what was the cost, what was the reputational damage to the company as a result of this, and was it a once-off occurrence, or has it been something that's been ongoing for a number of months or years, whatever the case might be. So that's kind of what you're looking at in your investigation. Once you've conducted the investigation, you're going to be holding, as Michelle said, a disciplinary hearing, and this again will be in line with your disciplinary procedures. I'm flying now because I know we're coming close on time, but the purpose of your hearing is to give the employee an opportunity to respond and to put their side of the story forward before you make a decision. So even if an employee has admitted that they've committed the offence, you still have the hearing and you still allow them to put their side of the story forward. And with hearings, as with any hearing, whether it's for theft or anything else, a disciplinary hearing, it's just to get the employee's side. There's no need for you as an employer or whoever it is conducting the hearing to have a kind of back and forth with what they say. You put the case to the employee, you ask them to put forward their response and their side of the story, and you minute it and you take notes and you say, thank you very much, we'll go away now and we'll consider the facts. That's all the disciplinary hearing needs to be. It doesn't need to be a two-way, well, actually, I don't agree with you because of this, because of that. You just take the employee's side of the story, thank you very much, and then you go away and you make your decision. So again, when we go back to theft, once you're making your decision, you may decide that no action is required. The suspicion was unfounded, it wasn't right, it wasn't true, so no action is required. You may decide that some disciplinary sanction, it wasn't actually gross misconduct, maybe it was unintentional, it was a small case, it was a first-time case, so you might just go with disciplinary action, but you might go with dismissal, and generally for the more, it's probably the most likely result if theft is found, because theft is gross misconduct. So where you are satisfied that gross misconduct did occur, you will move there to dismiss the employee. And the difference here with it being gross misconduct is that it usually results in a summary dismissal. So what I mean with it is summary dismissal is that if you find that gross misconduct occurred, i.e. the theft was gross misconduct, you can then dismiss the employee straight away. So you don't have to allow for the notice period. You would not even have to pay in lieu of notice because it was gross misconduct and it was a summary dismissal. So I'm just going to say it very briefly.
I don't know, I can do that in brief. No, I just have a couple of cases there, but I won't because they're too kind of long-winded. But again, it's the same thing. It was certain cases that not following the set steps that Laura's outlined, cost, one particular company 55,000. And really, when you look at the case itself, it's mind-boggling that employers will have to pay that sort of money simply because of the procedural side of it. I mean, the action was carried out by the employee, whether it was, it was found that obviously that, theft had occurred, but again, because the procedure's flawed, they lost out, whether it wasn't, the opportunity for them to appeal. And in one of the circumstances in case, it was the failure of the manager to take minutes of the meeting. That the tribunal kind of looked, you obviously didn't feel that this was serious enough to even record the minutes of it. Yes, you're in court now trying to defend yourself. So just little things that have to be, I suppose, wary of.
Yeah, so it is, it's a matter of just taking a deep breath and say, right, it's very likely this happened, but let's do it properly rather than rush in 2 feet and mess it up really. Take a step back, right, get your approach. It doesn't take that long. You can do it quite in a timely fashion, but it's just a more logical approach, I suppose. And absolutely, if theft occurred, because cases have shown, you can dismiss, and you can dismiss fairly. It's just a matter of going through a logical process, I suppose. We'll get to the questions now, I suppose, very briefly. If really the key thing is to create a no-tolerance environment and act logically if you do suspect it in terms of dismissing or taking action. So I'm eager to get to the questions now because I know we've gone over on time. So I think if there are any questions, we'd be happy to take them. And while we're getting them.
When they're here.
Bear with us now, apologies.
It disappeared.
Lovely. Just bear with us there for a moment.
Sorry, yeah, but whatever. If I have a suspicion that there might be somebody taking when they're on duty, what can I put? What sort of procedures can I put in place? I know that's a very generic sort of thing. Like, again, as Laura and myself had said earlier on, like, if the suspicion is there, then obviously you're going to investigate it. And to be very careful as well, like there was a case, even just to give you a bit of an idea with employers, like in the Dunn Stores case, they had covert CCTV that they used when they had suspected the employee, when they were running an investigation. And they also were running it alongside to see, was she stealing? And that was a huge big no-no as well when it comes to looking after it. So as to what sort of parameters you put in place, it really depends on the type of business that you are and what you're kind of going to benchmark if it's suspicions that there's a lot of irregularities in your till, with certain employees cashing up at the end of the night. If stock is going missing, some companies might turn around and say, right, they put clear rubbish bags in all of their bins, that they have certain lockdown kind of procedures with regard to cashing up or throughout the day where, they'll drop money or floats or whatever it is. So you can actually see, even to be able to pinpoint the time of the day, and also, where if you've employees that they're signing in and signing out off tills, that you don't have everybody using the same till. It just means that you're able to kind of fine tune perhaps the days, the dates, and the individual that might be suspect. And the same thing will apply. A huge big thing in every business is stock taking, that you're able to turn around on any given month or any given week, know when a lot of stock is going missing or the type of stock that's going missing. So it really depends again on the industry and the type of place as to what you can look out for and put in place to try and track it.
Just another question's come in. Can you check a potential new employee? Can you check their criminal record? And again, this goes back to the data protection rules, which are quite strict in this area, and they actually state that it is unlawful to request from a prospective new employee that they make a request to the to the Garda with regard to a criminal record. I suppose if it's something that's a real concern to you and you feel it's kind of sensitive in your business for whatever reason, you may want to consider instead in part of your pre-employment questions, you would have a standard question for all candidates as to whether they have any criminal convictions, and that would probably be the only thing that I would suggest that you do as a workaround.
Which is another question there regards the whistleblowing policy as well. Can I use this in most instances where employees may make a complaint? Well, again, as we showed earlier on, and even with the policy that we have in the Bright Contract software, that it is an independent policy and it sets out very clearly when you would use it in the company. But then you also have your other policies, such as the bullying harassment policy, if a complaint needs to be made from that type of form, from employee to employer or manager, or employee versus employee, or whatever it is. And then you have your independent grievance procedures, equally again in your company handbook, which is very necessary, where, you know, employees can raise certain concerns or grievances with work, you know, the conditions in work, or regarding their contract with you, or whatever it may be, that you do have separate procedures depending on the nature of the complaint as well. So yes, a whistleblowing policy, very necessary, as was outlined earlier on, but you know, you will have other policies as well, and a form for people to bring a complaint.
Perfect. I think we'll just take one more question before we finish up, and then if we've missed any, we can come back to you. But questions come in: should I contact, or can I contact the Gardaí? What I'd just say in relation to this is that if you think you should contact the Gardaí, just be wary of kind of putting in a knee-jerk reaction call to them, because if you notify the Gardaí, and there's been several cases on this actually, if you notify the Gardaí of some potential criminal activity or issues in work, you may have to suspend your own investigation and your own postpone your own disciplinary investigation, and so there's been several cases where a company has continued on with the investigation, has ruled that gross misconduct occurred, and they've dismissed the employee, but the guards have actually then subsequently acquitted the individual for the crime. So how do you stand up against how do you stand over your decision when the guards have acquitted the crime? But you know, certainly if you think it's a serious enough case, definitely do contact the guards, but just be wary about kind of knee-jerk reaction in terms of calling them first thing. Just be sure of your own kind of investigation first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Absolutely. So I think we'll
leave it at that. We've gone over time.
It's taken up enough of your time this morning. Thank you all very much for attending, and hopefully we'll see you all again on our next webinar. Thank you very much for your time.
It's great. Bye-bye.